Hello and welcome to SkyLight Pool's channel. My name is Umed and I am the owner and the operator of SkyLight Pool, ticker Sky and Sky2. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the influence of pledge on your stakeholder returns. So stay tuned, there's a lot of good information for you. So we've seen some chatter in the Cardano's ecosystem about the parameters in Cardano moving. More specifically, we're expecting K to move, or we're expecting A0 to move. For those of you who don't know, K is the maximum, it determines the maximum size of the pool, maximum optimized size of the pool. And A0 is a factor that produces differentiated returns for pools with higher pledge. So there are talks about these parameters moving in the future, and we would like to take a look with this video on how these parameters could influence the pools in terms of rate of return for stakeholders, and take a look in particular how the pledge would affect the returns on staking. So, but before we do that, let's take a look at the current landscape as it stands today to see what kind of pledge levels do we see currently. So if we go to Pool Tool and sort the pools by the declared pledge, we see that the highest pledged pool has 20 million in it. The second highest is 8, and then there's 7, 5, and it goes, you know, if you look at the top 100, it cuts off at 1 million. So we see pools anywhere from 20 million to 1 million. So this is basically the landscape, the magnitude of pledges as it stands today. Now, knowing that, let's take a look at what happens to returns as we move from one pledge level to another. And there are many stake pool operators who have 100K pledged to them, or maybe even less in some cases. So let's take a look at the current landscape and what kind of return differences we could be expecting as it stands today coming from the pledge alone. So this chart over here, the sensitivity table, describes the effect of pledge on the returns for stakeholders. I'm just waiting for the calculations to complete. If they are completed, then this could be our numbers. So as you see, the difference between the return between a pool that has 100K pledged to it and a pool that has, let's say, 4 million pledged to it is on annual basis is 0.03%. So there's not a whole lot of difference if you look at this magnitude of movements, right? So the 4 million produces, in other words, 0.03% per year extra returns to stakeholders. So this difference could be negated if the pool with a smaller pledge, for instance, decides to lower its fees. Let's say that, you know, we have a situation where the pool fees are at let's say that it's both pools are charging 3%. Let's take a look at that. Both pools are charging 3%. A pool with 100K pledged to it generates 528 per year. A pool with 4 million pledged to it generates 531, which is, as you can see here, is the difference of 0.03% per year. So that pledge isn't generating a lot of returns in this case for stakeholders. Now let's take a look, you know, keeping everything else equal, right? So let's take a look at what happens when we move the K. If the K moves from 150 to 500, for instance, we will see, let's just recalculate the whole table, we will see that the return actually increases. And here we need to look at a different column here. Well, let's take a look at this column because this is 4 million, and then do the comparison there. So 5.3 versus 5.21, and that is when the K increases to 500, and this is approximate, right? Because we are, talking about 3.8 versus 4 million. But just to give you an idea, the returns, the return difference increases, and why is that? That's because the ceiling or the maximum size of a pool goes down as the K increases, and when the K increases, the same pledge has a greater influence on returns because it's closer to the fullest to the maximum size of the pool. So the way it works in reality is that the higher pledge you have as a function of the size of the pool, the more returns you get, and you can see that in this graph in this sensitivity table. The highest returns you could ever get in the Cardano's ecosystem is the pool that is 100% pledged. So a pool at K500 that has 64 million pledged to it will generate the highest return, which is 6.92. And that's basically at the variable fee of 3%. Now, since not everybody has 63 million, and people will be getting lower return than that. And the difference will go back to the reserves. That's the way the system works. But the difference between a lower pledge and a higher pledge pool is still not that great. Let's take a look at one other step. Let's say that we are, 1 year from now, and the K is 1,000. What happens then? And we keep, the pledges, the pledge levels which we are comparing the same. So we can take a look at a pledge. We don't have a number that has 4 million. Okay, let's just make this 4 million and recalculate the whole thing. So what happens when you increase the K to 1,000? The difference in annual terms between a pool that has 4 million pledged to it and a pool that has 100K pledged to it is still below 1%. It's below even 0.25% per year, and it went up to 0.016%. Now let's take a look at the effect of changing A0. Now, a full disclosure, I don't think the A0 is going to move by that much, because moving it significantly is going to reduce the earnings of pools that they don't have a lot of pledge. And we're talking about 1 million to 4 million range. If you increased A0 to 5, for instance, from its current level of 0.3, it could severely penalize anybody that doesn't have a lot of pledge in their pool. And by a lot, I'm talking about, tens of millions of ADA. And I don't think that's going to happen. So, but let's take a look at that scenario anyway. So let's take a look and say we are going to increase A0, which influences the returns as a function of pledge, to 5, and see what the return levels would be. So what that does at K1000 is that it reduces the returns that a lower pledge pools have and increases the returns for the higher pledge pools. But if you look at this run line, and I chose it arbitrarily, of course, but just to keep things consistent, you will see that everybody gets a haircut here, right? The difference between a pool that has 100K pledged to it and a pool that has 12 million pledged to it is still within, a very low. It's within a percent, within 1% or 2. It's within 1%. That means that because we don't have a lot of pools with let's say, pledges from 16 to 32, or currently, if the K moves to 1,000, we are not going to see a lot of, if K moves to 1,000, we're not going to, have an A0 equal to 5, for instance. But I think most likely in this early stage, when there are still pool operators coming into the ecosystem and wanting to create pools, to give them a fair chance, A0 probably will stay within its reasonable range to provide those returns. Because once you move the A0 to, let's say, 4 or 5, then unless you have a really high pledge, you won't be getting those higher returns. So right now everybody's getting 5% plus, and that's kind of a healthy way of developing this ecosystem. So long story short, when the K starts moving, the pledge of the pools that have higher pledge will be enjoying a higher returns, but still, because of the fact that A0 is 0.3 and unlikely to move, these differences are not that great and probably won't be for a while, unless we have players that decide to pledge 64 or 32 million in the case of K1000, and then they will be getting maybe the rewards that are 1.5 or 2% bigger than the lowest pledge pools. But again, the difference isn't that great in that respect. I mean, okay, 2% is probably tangible, but if you are talking about a difference in pledge between 100,000 and let's say 4 million or 3.5 or 8 million, the differences are not going to be great. So that's the way the system at this point works. And I hope this information was useful to you to make decisions. And I'll see you next time.